Welcome to Green and Gold FC. I'm joined by my usual co-host Alex. How you going? How's your week?
Yeah, week was pretty good. Perth Glory versus Newcastle Jets could have gone a lot better. I think that's fair to say for me at least. But another interesting week of Australian football. A lot of good moments, to be fair, leading up to the World Cup, of course, in June. So a lot of stuff for the Australian casual fans to keep their eyes on.
So let's dive straight in. So we'll start with choice for the match of the round. Actually, there's a bit of challenges with editing, so we actually didn't get our match of the round pick out until the match had already happened. But we did predict that the match of the round was Jets versus Glory. Jets are now 4 points clear, which is brilliant for them. Young squad, brilliant for Australian football as a whole. But Perth, a red card, and to be honest, their performance, Adam Griffiths told us to forget Mountain Goats, delete it from our memory, and I'm starting to remember them. Can you take us through it?
Look, it was a very tough game for us. Look, full credit to the Newcastle Jets as well. I hate to be that guy that bangs on and on about opponents, but Newcastle have been absolutely fantastic this season. I said it, I believe last weekend on the pod, that they're probably in my mind the best A-League side or the most entertaining A-League side we've seen since Barcelona. And ironically, they beat Barcelona's winning record this week. It's going 7 wins in a row for the first time in A-League history, which is absolutely outrageous from them. Mark Milligan's working wonders with a very young squad, so it's fantastic to see, especially in a salary cap league at this stage, that the Newcastle Jets have been able to do such great recruitment and sort of put that much faith in their academy talents to actually come through for them, and they're coming through big time, I think it's fair to say. But in terms of the actual game, look, I wouldn't even say that Newcastle were particularly that dangerous in terms of just on-the-ball brilliant. I'd more so say that they overloaded the Glory in midfield, did very well to sort of prevent Glory from getting forward on the break, which I think Glory rely a lot on. I think it's key to sort of their style of attacking. We've seen plenty of evidence of that in games such as Melbourne City, the 3-0 win, or the 3-0 win against the Mariners, where when teams do offer the Glory a lot of space, especially in midfield, they're very confident with being able to work the ball forward quick on a counter-attack, whether that's through wide areas or central areas. And it's fair to say that Newcastle just completely overloaded the Glory this game. Their midfield was absolutely rock solid. Max Burgess, I thought, had a great game in particular. Lachlan Bayliss, once again, another standout performer for the Jets. He's had a fantastic season. I was not expecting this at all. And look, he could potentially be a bolster for the New Zealand squad at some point. Maybe not necessarily for the World Cup, but there's not genuinely too much keeping him out of an international call-up at this stage, I feel. And that, to me, is sort of the story of the game. Just Newcastle, tactically very strong, controlled the midfield throughout the entire 90 minutes. Glory did get a bit lucky to put one back at the end through Steph Kolakovsky. But I think the biggest frustration coming out of that game is probably just the lack of sort of tactical fluency from Adam Griffiths. We've said this for a while now. He is very stubborn in terms of his idea of this 4-4-2. Not a lot of experimentation, not a lot of change with formation or anything like that. And ultimately, I did think that cost the Glory big time. I don't think we particularly needed 4 attackers. I feel like the extra man in midfield would have done us wonders in this scenario. Unfortunately, he didn't go with it, and I think we paid the price for that dearly.
So on to happier times from my perspective. Brisbane Roar, a little bit of encouragement. We got 1-1. We've been smart from my perspective in the transfer window. We got D'Agostino, which gave us a bit of punch up front. We got Load, which replaces Harrington, at least somewhat. And we managed to get this fellow Darrington, who, it's not a spectacular debut performance in midfield, but he did seem to plug the hole that Stajic left. We seemed a lot more balanced for the first time since he got injured. Am I a deluded Raw fan, or is there some hope to see in that performance on the weekend?
I don't necessarily think Brisbane are going to make top 6, just because I need to see a lot more consistency out of that defense. But there's a lot of teams that are going to challenge for top 6. I think that's the beauty of the A-League this season especially, is that there are genuinely a lot of big teams that with really good squads that are underperforming, the likes of the Glory and Brisbane. And then there's a lot of teams with relatively weaker squads that I say are overperforming, probably the likes of Macarthur, even maybe Melbourne City to a certain degree. And then you look at clubs like Newcastle especially. that are overperforming with their squads. I think that it's going to be a really tight race come the end of the season. Personally, I don't think Glory or Brisbane are going to make the top six. I think it's probably going to come down to Newcastle, Auckland, Sydney. I do think Macarthur will probably pip a spot there. I think Adelaide are going to be in big contention for a final spot as well. But there's several sides throughout this league that can honestly make a case for top six. It's hard to sort of predict at this point. There is going to be a lot of movement in the mid-table, I feel, before the end of the season, but Brisbane and Glory have two very good squads, but they lack consistency, and that's where I think their downfall is going to come. I think Brisbane have a weak defense, and that'll be their downfall, and I think Glory are weak in terms of attacking tactics, and I think that will be their downfall.
Fair enough. So I'll keep the hope keeps fans alive, but let's see. So let's move on to Socceroos. Devastating news this weekend. Miller is out for the World Cup with a serious injury. I was already stressing about right wing back. I tend to stress out about the most random positions, like who's my third choice goalkeeper for the World Cup. The round of 16 could depend on it, but right back was one where I think every Socceroos fan is stressing about. There's no clear first choice, but Miller maybe was just ahead of everyone else. He played the most games under Popper. Yeah, who replaces him? Do you use the fact that we're a bit thin at right back to have maybe an extra right back? We have a 26-man squad, which means you have 3 extra positions if you cover every position twice and have 3 goalkeepers. Would you take a third right back just to get competition in places? Or, yeah, how do you approach this if you're Popper?
It's absolutely heartbreaking to see this for Lewis Miller, because genuinely he has been one of the best performers for the Socceroos in, I'd say, the past 2 years. You know, he recovered from, I'd say, an awful spell of about a year and a half of international form, and then really, really kicked on after the Asian Cup, or the most recent Asian Cup. So it is really sad to sort of see how this whole scenario unfolded with him, unfortunately, getting the injury and requiring surgery. But I don't think it's necessarily as doom and gloom as some Socceroos fans are saying. Look, I understand losing one of the players in your best 11 is going to suck, obviously, and I'm not saying that it's not going to be a rough decision, but it's not like we have no backup options. I think there's 4 main players that we're going to be looking at to sort of fill that role. I'd say Fran Karasic is one up there. We need him to get consistent game time. We need him to be putting up good performances and consistent minutes. Another one for me, and this is a guy that's going to get on the plane pretty much in any scenario, it's going to be Sammy Silvera. Just in terms of his versatility, he has to be a guy that you bring on the plane. Can play on the wing either side in Popper's front 3. Can play left wing back. He has done for Middlesbrough. He's played right wing back for the Socceroos. That just has to be a pick that goes forward no matter what. Jacob Italiano made his return from injury last night in Austria, put up a good performance. He's someone that I do think is very likely to get on the plane. Whether or not he earns a starting spot remains to be seen. And the last one I think is a bit of a bolster pick is going to be James Overy. There are several key reasons why you'd want to get someone like Overy into that squad. The biggest of which, in my opinion, being tying him down to the national team for the foreseeable future. Obviously, Scotland and England will be chasing him, as well as he is eligible for both. But yeah, there's a few outside left field options that you could honestly look at and say maybe you do even go for them. I do think Keely Adamson will feel really hard done by. I feel like his lack of first team football and him not securing a January move away on loan has essentially all but killed his opportunities of going away with the national team. Ryan Strain could be another option. Need to see more from him though. Haven't really been too impressed with what I've seen out of him recently. Daniel Benny could be another one that we could possibly see, so who knows what's going on there. He has been sort of getting a few minutes here and there for QPR, but nothing insanely concrete in terms of a starting position. Ultimately, there's a lot of questions up in the air. If you ask me, I think that they will end up going with Italiano, Silvera, and Overy. That would be my sort of picks of who I'd take along. Silvera as a depth option on either side and possibly a starter on the right. But if you're asking me who I think the best options are, I would genuinely consider starting Jordan Boss at left wing back and starting Jacob Italiano at right wing back. I just think that Jacob is a bit better defensively than Sammy, and I think you're going to need that extra defensive cover when we get to the World Cup.
Yeah, it's good to have those tactical options too. Someone who's more attacking, more defensive, so you can respond to different stages in the game. So no love for Kachumbas, who was Green and Gold FC's pick for Popper Surprise next week, and no love for any A-League right backs, which are boulders for the World Cup.
It's tough to say with sort of Socceroo bolster picks for right wing back, especially in the A-League. I don't really think there is a lot there at the moment. I do agree with saying that right wing back is probably the weakest position we have at the moment in terms of just personnel, especially with Lewis Miller missing. There are a couple of picks that you can look at. I think the main one for a lot of people is going to be Nathaniel Atkinson, but with him sort of moving here and there into a more midfield role, he could be an option that you pick to go to the World Cup, but I just feel like you have a lot of players ahead of him in the current pecking order at the moment. I do feel like he's one of our better attacking options, however, in terms of wing back. He is very technical. I think he's shown that to a very good degree in the A-League. But personally, I just feel like maybe the fact that he has gone back to Australia rather than toughing it out in Scotland is going to hurt his chances. In terms of other teams, look, there are a lot of young players coming through that I do genuinely think are going to be in with a chance in the future. One of which that I've been very impressed with this season has been Bert Olyroos from the Newcastle Jets. I think he's had a really strong season, and I do hope to see him more involved in the national youth teams going forward, because he is one of those players that is getting that sort of rare senior experience at this kind of age and getting a lot of trust put in him by the Socceroos. By Mark Milligan to actually, be able to carry some of that defensive burden, but also look quite good in attack as well. In terms of other picks, though, I'm not even going to begin to entertain the option of Ryan Grant. I think that ship has sailed. That ship should have sailed a long, long time ago. But I think finally we're past that point where we're considering him for a Socceroos gig. Callum Talbot, I'll still say, is relatively far off in terms of my options for a Socceroos call-up. Thomas Aquilina honestly wouldn't be the worst option to keep an eye on. I don't think it is going to happen, given that he's sort of in and out of the Jets starting 11. I just don't think there's enough there. But yeah, in terms of right wing backs, I don't think there's anyone particularly in the A-League that I'm looking at the moment and saying that they could be a bolster option, apart from maybe Nathaniel Atkinson.
Yeah, well, we know Ernie Merrick, when we had a weak position for goalkeeper, decided that no NPL club can play a foreign goalkeeper. So maybe we need to say no NPL club can play a foreign right wing back at the moment until we manage to find one for the Socceroos. So let's talk about some better news. Aussies abroad. So McGree and Toure cut and paste from last week. Once again, they score. Of course, McGree scored in a loss, top of the table clash, but they're still in the automatic qualification promotion places. And Mo Toure, of course, was a sub and scored once again.
Yeah, look, the Aussies are dominating the championship at the moment. What can we say? I'm very disappointed that Middlesbrough didn't get the win, unfortunately, over Coventry. I think that could have been huge for them in terms of their push for automatic promotion. Do I think they'll still get automatic promotion? I think they're going to do enough to get up, which is a really, really good sign for Australian football at this stage. I just don't think that Millwall or any of the clubs in close proximity in the playoff spots particularly have the quality to be able to make up that kind of gap. Even though there are a lot of games left, don't get me wrong, I do feel like Millwall have the quality, that Middlesbrough have the quality needed. But Riley McGree, look, we talked last week about the possibility of him being the best player in the championship. I mean, he's not exactly, worsening that case with with his recent run in terms of goal involvements. And Mo Toure, man, just what a player he's turning out to be. I did see a Norwich fan on Twitter saying that Socceroos fans shouldn't get too excited because he's only doing this good because he's getting this much service, and I completely agree. However, I do see a lot of players that we have in our national team side that can get him that service, the likes of Boss, McGree, Aaron Kunda. It's just a question of whether or not Tony Popovic wants to play those kinds of players, or whether we're going to see starting on the wings in the World Cup Connor Metcalfe and Brandon Borrello. But, that's neither here nor there, and I guess we won't find out the answer to that until the World Cup does start.
So, final thing about Aussies abroad, I want to highlight that MLS is about to start, and we have a new bunch of Socceroos bolters appearing, and Harrington has started every single friendly so far and scored. Looks like he is first choice at centre-back. Hayden Matthews and Jason Guerrier are the backup right centre-backs, as far as I can tell. Do you think Harrington can make the Socceroos squad?
For me, at this stage, he does, just because he seems like an option that you can sort of seemingly put in there at any of the back three spots, and I think he's going to do a great job. I feel like our biggest concern will probably be that left centre-back spot. I know the big sort of obvious answer is Kai Rolls. I just feel like he's been on a bit of iffy form as of recent. I think it's going to be down between him and Jack Iredale, but I do think Kai Rolls will get the nod. Personally, I would go with Jack Iredale. I think he's been performing pretty well consistently for Hibernian, but you know, there seems to be some sort of blackmail against Socceroos coaches when it comes to Kai Rowell selections for the World Cup squads. But in terms of backup centre backs, I do think that our best two backup centre back options right now would be Hayden Matthews and Lucas Harrington. Obviously, the big if over Hayden Matthews is, does he stay fit? Does he get good minutes for Portsmouth? But there are a lot of good signs there. I would say Milos Degenek is still in contention, scored his first goal for his team in Cyprus this week, though moving to the Cypriot League doesn't exactly, for me, help his case when it comes to a World Cup year. Jason Guerrier, obviously, phenomenal sort of physical presence. I don't know if he's doing enough for me at the moment to justify a World Cup squad pick, whereas Lucas Harrington has easily been the best A-League defender, in my eyes at least, for the last, maybe like 6 months, maybe even a year. He's easily been one of the best defensive talents to come out of the A-League in a long, long time. Athletic freak, really decent on the ball, good with that sort of build-up, and very confident in aerial duels. He's the exact kind of person who, for me, I would want backing up Harry Souttar in that kind of situation if Souttar does have questions over his fitness. In terms of other picks, Gethin Jones maybe is an outside option. I just don't think that at that stage we're going to be looking at him. I haven't been keeping up with him too much with his form at MK Dons, I will admit, though the fact that I haven't really heard anything outstanding probably just indicates that it's more just a sort of here and there sort of bit of form for him at the moment, but it could be an outside of left field pick, who knows. I think one more that I think a lot of fans should keep an eye on, at least at this stage, is Anthony Pantazopoulos. Do I personally think he's going to get into the World Cup squad? No, but would he be someone that I wouldn't mind seeing called up to the friendlies beforehand? I would absolutely love to see him called up to the friendlies beforehand. I do feel like he could be a good option at left centre-back if there are concerns over Burgess, and if we don't necessarily want to go with someone like Kai Rolls. He has, tremendous ability from set pieces. He's strong, he's aggressive, he's quick. I think he has a lot of good physical capabilities that Burgess just doesn't really possess at the moment, and an absolute cannon of a left foot. So that certainly doesn't take away from his case at all.
Yeah, I tell you what, Harrington, when we played Croatia's under-21s, I don't know if you remember that tournament. There's like an Olyroos tournament early last year, which was just a bunch of friendlies. That's when I first noticed there's something more special about him than even what we've seen in the A-League. His ability to just turn difficult clearances into passes, which you often see elite centre-backs being able to do, just be able to take a contested ball and control it, be able to get those last ditch blocks and tackles in when the defense has been beaten. I started to see real alive potential in him. So I really hope that, we start to see that in the MLS, which will be brilliant. Speaking of the Olyroos, we no longer have Tony Vidmar running the Olyroos. Obviously, I'll be honest, I've been quite critical of having someone with no COD experience take the second most prestigious job in Australian men's football. What are you looking for in a replacement?
It's a bit of a rough sort of question. Personally, I think I've had just about enough of the Vidmars in the Australian national coaching system. So there goes for that sort of that sort of predicament. I think what we're looking for in a replacement, and what I'd at least be looking for, is someone that is willing to be pragmatic, someone that's willing to change, someone that's willing to experiment. I feel like our big problem under Vidmar was that he was very stubborn in terms of his setup. There was no experimentation, and it was very much just relying on a lot of the players' sort of individual ability getting us through tough games. And while that worked at times, there were several occasions where it didn't work. The recent rendition of the under-23s Asian Cup is a perfect example of why you need better tactical structure and why individual ability can't carry you through those kinds of games. Look at how bad we struggled against teams like China as a perfect example. I feel like with the new coach, you need someone who's not going to play favorites, for one. You need someone who is going to be fluent and willing to be challenged on their sort of set beliefs and willing to actually change and adapt. That's a big thing for me, especially in international football and youth football in general. And overall, someone who's going to take responsibility and be willing to actually, grab this team by the horns and, take them through to the next stage. Because let's not forget here that the under 23s is the best pathway we have into the Socceroos, at least in my opinion. You look at all the recent call-ups that we've had from the young Socceroos to the Socceroos men's team, even just to the training camps. You have the likes of Adrian Segicic, you have the likes of Sebastian Esposito, you have the likes of James Overy, who's even made his Socceroos debut. Mo Torre is another perfect example. These are a lot of guys that are coming through that sort of under 23 system and then making that big jump to the senior men's national team side, some of which are making that jump without having ever played senior football, in the perfect case of James Overy. I do feel like we need someone who is more willing to give us that sort of Arnie approach, where he is willing to get sort of down and dirty into the roots and sort of take this by the horns. And look, I'm not a fan of Arnold when it comes to tactics and his lack thereof when it comes to sort of pragmatism with the national team, but I do have to give him tremendous respect for the fact that he's probably the most hands-on coach we've had in terms of a national team coach for a long, long time, maybe since at least Ange Postecoglou, and probably before Ange, a lot of the other coaches we had didn't sort of match Arnie in terms of that sort of want and need and desire to actually get involved at the roots of the operation. That's what we need with the next guy, because for me, if you want to build a competent coaching structure for the senior national teams, you have to start from the youth teams. Carl Viet's a tremendous introduction in terms of the youth teams as well. I want that next person in the under 23s gig to have that similar mindset of, okay, we need to get involved here. We need to make sure our boys are learning, that they're making the right decisions, that we're setting them up to actually be able to compete and put their names out there on the global stage. These tournaments are big indicators for a lot of big teams around Europe as to possible talents to sign. We've seen after the Under-18s World Cup the amount of talents from Mexico, Morocco, Egypt that are now getting big moves to teams like Barcelona, to teams all around Europe. This is a perfect opportunity to get in an experienced coach who's going to be willing to allow these boys to play the best football they possibly can and get their names out there. And overall, that's going to do nothing but benefit Australian football at both the youth level and senior level in the long term.
Yeah, I think like when you look at the difference in success between our best coaches at youth level and our worst coaches, it's just chalk and cheese. So if you look at who's made the top four, nearly every single success, I think, was from Graham Arnold, uh, Jans Verzilchen, was another one who did really, really well. And you look at our best coaches, Trevor Morgan, of course, has really done really well. And those coaches are making the top four of Asian Cup tournaments, whether it's under 23s, under 20, or under 17s, nearly 100% of the time. Whereas you take all other coaches combined, I think there's only been 2 qualifications for the top 4. So it makes a big difference, even more than at senior level. So it's absolutely crucial to get this right, particularly in Australia, where the Olympics has such a big importance to our national sporting psyche. It's almost like qualifying for the World Cup, just in terms of how important it is. And my theory is that step one, you mentioned Carl Viet. Carl Viet has experience as a club coach, and I think there's just stuff you get from experience that you don't get from a textbook, from reading coaching courses and doing maybe very, very well at them. And we've had trainee coaches for the most part in these positions. So for me, what I'd like is someone who's finished top 6 in the A League, being okay in Asia, and has that experience. Because one thing which went wrong for me for Tony Vidmar is when I watched his team in friendly tournaments, they were very clinical at finishing. But when it came to the actual tournaments which matter, you see them missing big chance after big chance. And that tells me that the mental prep is not great. And mental prep is part of what you learn at club football. Like, when I look at the mental prep, what I can see about, I can't see what's going on in the training ground or in the dressing room. For the last tournament, what was his media game? It was all talking about Aaron Kunda. It's talking about players that weren't there and all the drama about that. And of course, you think, how does that affect players who are there? that all the discussion is about Aaron Kundu, who's not here, rather than the players which are here. Now, to be fair, that's very hard because media will sometimes ask fair questions, but questions which make it hard for you to mentally prepare your players. But you still need to know how to handle it. You need to know how to handle the press conference, and you need to know how to handle behind the closed doors, which, to be fair, we don't see. This tournament, again, what's all the discussion about? And he's making very fair comments. I grant that, about how there's a bunch of players not there. But once again, if you're playing in that dressing room and you say, well, the coach wants a bunch of players which aren't here, they don't believe in me, rather than talking up the players which we have here, the mental prep for that tournament is going to be off. And once again, we saw chance after chance up. I don't know how many games you saw, just completely gettable chances just going wide. And it was just frustrating to watch.
Yeah, look, I completely agree with you in the sense that he made way too much of a big deal in terms of players that weren't there. And look, let's not kid ourselves and pretend like we had absolute bums playing for us in the recent under-23s Asian Cup. We had some good players that are getting good senior experience in A-League levels or, around Europe. Yet we put up terrible performances at that stage. And I have to put a lot of it down to really poor squad selection as well. Some of the picks and some of the starting 11 options, to me, made no sense. Jalen Pearman only starting one game throughout the entire tournament was a disgrace. Some of the forward picks for some of the games were just nonsensical. Nat Blair getting starts over Luka Jovanovic for most of the tournament was just another ridiculous decision. There is just way too much at that sort of level. Look, if you're asking me who I'd want to be the next under-23 coach personally, I think the most likely option and the one I think would be a really good one would be Trevor Morgan just getting a promotion from the 20s to the 23s, but ultimately that leads to you then having to find another coach for the 20s. My dream option for the 23s, honestly, at this stage would probably be Graham Arnold. I do not think that at this stage he would come back, especially after the World Cup with Iraq. I don't think that that's going to be a possibility. It would be a dream option. I just don't think it's going to happen. But there are a few Australian coaches that you can honestly look around and say they could be an option. Klomovsky is another one that I think could be an interesting shout, a very, very interesting shout. There are a lot of other ones. Mark Jackson could even be a potential pick. I don't think that one would go through just because I feel like he would want to do some more club coaching. Probably similar story with Klomovsky as well at that stage. Mark Jackson does have a contract running up with Buriram at the end of the season, so maybe you do get in an interim for the under-23s until that happens. But honestly, who knows? There's a lot of good coaches around the country that I genuinely do think could fill in that role. It's just about finding the right person. Look, maybe Ange decides that he wants to take a break from club football for the time being and decides that he wants to get back involved in the youth teams because he has something to redeem and he, needs to get bragging rights back over Craig Foster. And if he does decide that, he gets all my respect and all my best wishes. Please make it happen, Ange. But I think the most obvious pick right now, at least if I were on the Socceroos board or the Football Australia board, would just be to entrust that role to Trevor Morgan. He's done fantastic with the under-20s group. That under-20s group is now in the under-23s. I think he can get the best out of him again, especially when there is a huge tournament coming up within a couple years that does decide whether or not we do make the under-23s World Cup and the Olympics, of course.
Yeah, I just to reiterate a point I made before, I just looked at the actual stats for qualification. Since we've been in Asia, all three types of tournaments, U16s or 17s, 20s, and 23s, those who got top four finishes, Arnie, Yan, and Morgan, they've had 9 attempts in the match in the top 4 8 times out of 9. Everyone else, just 2 from 16. So hopefully we get this right. Okay, so moving on to Aussie clubs who are representing Australia. We've got Melbourne City, who we covered last week. Macarthur, who've been disastrous. And of course, we have South Melbourne, the OFC Pro League. So since we covered City, well done again. Macarthur disaster in Asia. Their dad's army fails to get the job done in Bangkok. I am prepared to be very harsh on this, but do you want to give some perspective, or do you want to double down and give them a rocket?
I would personally love to hear you hammer them because I am absolutely disgusted by what I saw. Look, I've watched this Macarthur team in the in the Asian Champions League this season in person, and I can tell you that this is a side that a lot of the times is entirely devoid of inspiration when it comes to forward attack. And when you make a signing like Mitch Duke, you really, really have to switch on when it comes to your productivity going forward. The fact that they dropped Luke Vickery for me was enough of an indicator that they just were not going all out for this game. They didn't expect Bangkok to be coming at them with this sort of aggression. And ultimately, it bit them straight on the arse because now they're going into a second leg 2-0 down already, albeit it is a home leg for the second game. But that kind of poor performance is just not going to cut it, especially when we have so much as a federation. We have so much this season relying on that Macarthur and Melbourne City combined run in Asia. We need them to switch on in these kinds of games and these kinds of knockout situations. And it's really disappointing because let's not forget that Macarthur could have had a run all the way to, I believe it was the final, without coming up against a Japanese or Korean side. This would be a monumental missed opportunity if they go out to Bangkok, who, in all fairness, are a good team. No disrespect to Bangkok. I don't want to discredit their performance because they played a very good, very strong, very dominant game. But this would be a huge missed opportunity and a huge stain on Australian continental football, because if we mess up this opportunity, it's gonna be a real dark spot on Australian football for this season.
And hasn't just been this one match where Macarthur's looked awkward. Even matches they've won, they've struggled in Asia, I thought, this year. I think one thing where I'd criticize them is the first 11 selection. So I've called them Dad's Army. And I think like they've been okay in the A-League, Macarthur, but some of the players which are doing best in Asia are different to the players which are doing best domestically. So Asia is a very different style of football. So it's more technical. The technical standard is up, but the physical standard's a bit down. And so often throughout our history of clubs in Asian football, you've seen players which are deemed not good enough for the A-League and they can't hold down a regular starting spot, but actually look at the level above the level, or at least above the level of their teammates in Asia. So it's a thing you have to select the right squad. So Melbourne City, they have a lot of young players who are technical, which are getting starting spots, and they can handle the technical side of Asia. And even if they're not physically ready to dominate or do really well in the A-League quite yet, it doesn't matter as much in Asia. So they aren't getting found out physically and they can do very, very well. Melbourne City are getting just as much chances as their opponents. They aren't exactly parking the bus, so have roughly 50-50 possession in most games. Macarthur, the most dominant player in Asia probably is Vickery, and yet he's probably not always going to be first name on the team sheet in the A-League. In fact, there's been, I don't know if you know the history, if there's any players which come to mind where you're like, they were probably not good enough to start every week in the A-League, but they actually looked really, really well in Asia. The first one which comes to mind, I'd say, would be Jesse Macarthur. So he's one who never was able to hold down a starting spot in the A-League, but I thought he was a pretty consistent performer in Asia. So do you think there's been an issue of selecting the best side to win an A-League game rather than who's best to win an Asian game?
That definitely is a factor, and I think that's something that people overlook, especially when it comes to Melbourne City, as to why they perform so well in Asia versus the A-League. Look, when you have a really, really young squad, and we discussed this on last week, and you made a really good point that in terms of the Asian Champions League, they have the youngest squad and the third lowest squad value in the entirety of the Asian Champions League, despite being an Australian squad. It's a perfect indicator of, I guess, where your priorities can go wrong if you are just not, I guess, as involved in the idea of squad selection and research as you should be. And let's not kid ourselves here. Melbourne City have an incredible scouting network, so they would know all about these Asian teams and how they operate and the quality of the Chinese league, as they have, I think it's Sichuan Junyai, as a sister club, and they also have Yokohama F Marinos as a sister club in Japan, and there's clubs all around Asia that their CFG would have set up networks with, so it's very obvious that they do know the qualities of the Asian leagues and also the weaknesses of the Asian leagues, and that's why I think they're so easily able to, well, maybe not easily, but so well able to actually adapt to these situations and identify what's needed out of certain games and what's needed with efficient squad building when you are at this stage. And I do think that that's why they've also gone so heavy in the transfer market this January for proven A-League level players that I don't necessarily know if they're going to be the best when it comes to sort of Asian Champions League performances, but they are going to provide unreal quality when it comes to A-League performances. And look, we've seen Marcus Yunus already, a player who, yes, was good at A-League level, but never really stood out at the Wanderers, has already popped up with a good performance and a goal, a last-minute winner in Asia. And I think he's going to have a really good resurgence under Melbourne City for the rest of the season. But you look at players like Ryan Teague, extremely technical. You look at Daniel Arzani when he comes back to full fitness, hopefully, extremely technical and very good one-on-one winger, game breaker, game changer. Harrison Delbridge going to add a lot of experience after a very long stint in Korea to that backline. It seems like Melbourne City really is going all out for a perfect end to their Asian Champions League campaign. Do I think they're going to get top 6? I do think they're going to squeak it out. I do think they'll finish in the top 6 at the end of the A-League season. But for them, I genuinely feel like, to them, Asian Champions League football is more important for this season. And I don't think that they're assuming they're going to win it by any degree or any mark, because, you know, when you're going up against the big Saudi teams or the big J-League teams, the big K-League teams even, obviously you're not going to think that you're going to win it being an A-League club, but the prospects of potentially having an A-League side go that far in the tournament is huge, absolutely massive for Australian football, and it's a huge credit to Melbourne City. I know a lot of people don't like the idea of City being part of the CFG, but realistically, none of this would have been possible without CFG involvement and this kind of scouting and this kind of networking across the continent. This isn't just effective squad building. This is squad building that has been planned essentially to counteract the weaknesses of Asian football. And that's where I think Melbourne City have got this absolutely spot on and where Macarthur have got this horrifically wrong.
Yeah, another example, I mean, early in the tournament, we saw Romani, who is just so scrawny and really struggling physically in the A-League. Yet that just doesn't matter in Asia, and he's a bit of a standout in his games. And I said, like, lean into the technical side and not worry if a player's not physically ready if you're building a squad. The other extreme, which has worked as well, is Adelaide United back in, I think around 2008, as well as Western Sydney Wanderers, really lent into being compact, tight, defensive, and physical. And that can also work. But the problem for me, for Macarthur right now, is it feels like they're playing a possession-based game without a side which is technically strong enough for Asia. And so it's just not working for me. But let's talk about some good news. Melbourne City are playing this week. It's not a dead rubber because obviously that affects who they are facing in the finals. And China have just been knocked out. They have 0 participants in any of the knockout rounds in either ACL 1 or 2, which means that they have given their score and we are just basically chasing their points to get the extra spot for 27-28. If I'm not mistaken, 2 wins this week, I think, gets us there. Yes. Do you think Melbourne City go all out, or do you think they'll be a bit complacent? Because often when you have nothing to play for, you already settled the spot, you can often get a bit complacent. Even if you say you're not, we've often seen those performances drop.
I think they're going to go all out personally. I would like to see them go all out, especially because these coefficient points mean so much. Every win does help. Every point is huge for us at this stage. And I think ultimately they'd want to go out for the better placement when it comes to the actual knockout rounds. I know that it is unlikely that they do go on and win the tournament like we just said. But look, Melbourne City, I think, have had a tremendous Asian Champions League campaign. I think they'll want to end it off really strong. I do think that they'll go with a relatively full-strength lineup. I would like to see Daniel Arzani back in the squad if he is fit, ready and raring to go. But look, I think they can afford to rotate the side just a little. I don't think that they necessarily have to go all out here, but it's more just a want for me to see them get another 3 points leading into the knockout rounds. If you can get a guy like Daniel Arzani into the starting lineup, get a guy like Marcus Yunus in there, have your usuals like your Max Caputos, even see if your Alessandro Lapana is already, you get your young players in at the back. I think that there is every opportunity here that City grab 3 more points going into the knockout round. So it's going to be huge for us. It's going to be a huge, huge couple of weeks for the coefficient, especially. It's just a shame that the OFC Pro League doesn't apply to our coefficient because Well, I think it's fair to say the Australian representative in South Melbourne are doing quite well over there, so that probably would have had us pipped up over China by now. But unfortunately, that's not the case. We're going to have to rely on Melbourne City and or Macarthur turning their fortunes around. But look, I do think Melbourne City will take this very seriously, go in full strength, and hopefully get another win going into the knockouts.
So let's move on to the OFC Pro League. So South Melbourne are facing the top of the table in the next hub. They're facing Auckland FC. They still have their destiny in their hands. They've had a couple of hiccups. They've had a couple of draws, but managed to get things on track in a completely wild game with 3 red cards. That was bizarre. I don't know if you saw it, but they now have a chance to go top of the table this hub. How do you rate their chances?
But for a team that got essentially gutted a couple of weeks before the Pro League started, they've done very well to recover some huge wins on their way to getting into this league position that they currently find themselves in. I think winning the OFC Pro League is probably out of the question. I don't want to put anything up to it right now, just because this Auckland side have shown that they're prone to a slip up here and there, despite them having easily the best squad in the OFC Pro League. I think that South Melbourne would be proud with their showing for the first rendition of the tournament. I think there's definitely a lot of recruitment to be done ahead of the second season, and I definitely think that the introduction of the OFC Pro League is going to be a positive indicator when it comes to their actual recruitment over the next year, 2 years. And if this is a regular thing where we see them as the only Australian representative, I do think that this is going to be very important for the sort of revival of South Melbourne as that sort of top dog in the NPL Victoria, because the opportunity of playing in the OFC Pro League as well as the NPL Victoria as well as the Australian Championship surely just has to be enticing to a lot of Australian players. But, you know, like I said, losing a lot of key players before the season and being able to recover and sort of push on in the way they did is very, very good. I'm very happy to see the progress that they've made. And look, hopefully we can see them have a little bit more success towards the back end of the tournament, maybe even go on to win it, though I don't think that's going to happen. But I think it's all setting up nicely for a potential push next season.
I have to say, I can't believe they beat Avondale with Avondale's budget and South Melbourne's schedule. So that was an amazing performance. But let's invite the other Alex on and let's talk NPL. And welcome, Alex Araújo, to talk about NPL and what's been going on in the state leagues. How you going?
Good. Yourself?
Not too bad. Let's start with NPL Victoria match of the round. South Melbourne with a really impressive and, to be honest, pretty comfortable win over Avondale Bling and their $3 million budget. I did not expect it to be that one-sided. Do you think South Melbourne's superior match fitness with their OFC Pro League played a role here? Or do you think maybe Avondale, with so many new players, they need a bit of time to get going? Or do you think this is just a sign of how the season is going to go?
I think obviously with South Melbourne winning the championship, they've been able to build on that now with the NPL season. And yeah, obviously, as you've mentioned, with all the changes at sort of Avondale, it does take time to embed all the players to play as a team. So yeah, that does make a difference.
So let's talk NPL New South Wales. We have let's review our match of the round. West Sydney Wanderers flog Sydney in the Academy derby. It wasn't even close. And I believe you watched that game. Can you tell us what did Western Sydney do, which was so impressive? And were there any kids to keep an eye on?
Look, it was definitely, I don't know if the result reflects the game. I think it was a bit more even. I'll just sort of touch on some of the points that I saw from both sides. In terms of Sydney FC, they kept the ball for large parts of the game. I think where they struggled was to actually create chances from all that sort of possession. The Wanderers sort of defended quite well, whether it was sort of aggressive, high press, or sitting in a mid block or a low block. Sydney just really found it hard to sort of play through the congested lines and break them down. And Wanderers took advantage of that with a couple of goals on the break and a couple of goals sort of in behind the defence. So credit to Wanderers. I think the difference was they defended quite well, with Sydney, on the other hand, not as aggressive, not as compact, and I think that was the difference between both sides.
Yeah, I guess when a Youth are a bit unpredictable. It can be hard to read into that. So if you get beaten on the counter because you're not as compact, that could mean very little for these
Mm.
players' long-term prospects. So it's interesting to have that context. So next, let's talk about Northwestern Sydney, who of course qualified for the championship last year, had a very impressive win over your club, but they seem to stumble this week.
Yeah, so I was a bit obviously surprised to see that they were sort of losing by 3 goals, and it was only the last 10 minutes where they were able to score 2 goals. But as it's sort of known around Football New South Wales, Apia's got uh, incredible talent on the pitch and on the bench as well. So they're going to be one of the teams up there.
So Marconi absolutely flogged Rockdale. This was a statement match, right? Do you think I'm noticing a lot of the sides which are in the championship seem to be a little bit overperforming a little bit. Do you think the championship and being able to attract players has really helped these clubs basically go to another level?
Yeah, obviously as a player and as a coach as well, if you're being approached by a club that's in the championship, then you're more likely to go there because you want to expose yourself to the highest level possible. So, again, Marconi, a very good squad on the as a starting 11 and on the bench as well, where Rockdale have actually made quite a few changes. They lost their top goal scorer, Jurasevsky, to Bankstown City, which is sort of their rivals, but in the lower tier. So that will be hard to replace this year. But yeah, again, the 4-1 scoreline is still very surprising.
So going to lower down the ladder, we saw Mitchell Cross score a absolute stunning bicycle kick against Fraser Park. What do we know about Mitchell Cross? Is he a young player on the rise, or is he an old player that's had his moment of glory?
Yeah, so look, I coached in that league against Bankstown United at Fraser actually for a few years. So I know Mitch Cross quite well in terms of as a player. I think he's now in his 30s. He won Player of the Year a few seasons back as well in that division. A striker, sort of someone that holds up the ball really well, brings others into the game, then gets into the back post, and a goal scorer basically for Bankstown United. But the goal, as most people have probably seen it on social media, a cross from out wide, a bicycle kick, almost on the edge of the box. So it was great. He's probably getting a lot of calls about it, but unfortunately they still lost for them. Yeah, and Fraser won 2-1. So from my perspective, I was happy with that result.
Gee, being able to get your body move and do that sort of motion at the edge of the box when you're in your mid-30s,
Yeah.
I'd love to be able to do that myself.
Okay.
So final picks for match of the round in both New South Wales and Victoria.
So my match of the round for the Victorian NPL would be Oakley versus Altona Magic. Altona Magic obviously started the season off well in round 1. So I'd pick that as match of the round.
Yeah, indeed. And Oakley's had some smack talk about making the championship and how they're one of the only clubs which they think they can do it. So I'd love to see either them to back that up on the field, or to, it's always fun to see someone smack talk and then fall on their face. Either way, we have a good time. So what about NPL New South Wales?
Well, with NPL New South Wales, I haven't gone for sort of a usual teams that might be towards the top. I'm actually going for the 2 bottom teams at the moment. So the 2 teams that got promoted, UNSW and SD Raiders, they have lost both matches each. So they're both at the bottom of the ladder. So I think it's going to be an important result if someone can win it to determine who potentially stays up at the end of the season.
And indeed, that is the exciting thing about promotion relegation, which has been a lot in the football social media spaces over the last few days, that you don't have to pick a match of the round at the top of the table. The relegation race is also exciting. So that's make sure you tune in. And watch those games. Thank you so much, Alex. please join us on greenandgoldfc.com if you have comments on the forum. We're also on Twitter, Spotify, Apple, and of course YouTube. Hit that like and subscribe button. Until next time, that's all we have time for. It's bye for now.